Here's a statistic that might change the way you think about calcium supplements. The countries that consume the most calcium, the USA, Scandinavia, Australia, have among the highest rates of osteoporosis in the world. And the countries with the lowest calcium intake often have the lowest rates of osteoporosis. That's called the calcium paradox. And it's one of the most important clues we have about why calcium supplementation for most people is not the answer for bone health. Now, calcium itself is essential, don't misunderstand me. Your body cannot function without it. But the way calcium supplements have been marketed, especially for women over 50, it's oversimplified a complex picture. And for some people, taking the wrong form of calcium in the wrong dose without the right cofactors may actually be causing you more harm than good. In this video, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about calcium, why your body needs it, and when a calcium supplement might actually make sense. Plus the potential risks that most people are not warned about with calcium supplements. How to take it correctly. If you're currently taking a calcium supplement or if your doctor has recommended you take one, keep watching because some of you may be surprised that you may be taking the wrong form of calcium. Let's start with the basics because calcium is genuinely one of the most important minerals in the human body. Most people know that calcium is important for bones, but it does a lot more than that. Calcium is involved in nerve signaling. Every time a nerve impulse fires, calcium is involved. It's essential for muscle contraction, including the heart muscle. It plays a role in blood clotting, and it's required for hormone secretion as well. It acts as a messenger inside your cells, and it triggers a wide range of biological processes. So you can see it's super important. About 99% of your body's calcium is stored in the bones. The remaining 1% circulates in your blood and tissues. But it's that 1% that's absolutely critical, and your body will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain that narrow range. This is where it gets interesting. If you're not getting enough calcium through your diet, your body simply doesn't run low. It starts pulling the calcium out of your bones to keep the blood levels stable. This process is called bone resorption. And if it happens chronically over many years, you're going to progressively end with less dense bones. And this is exactly what osteoporosis is. So the logic of take more calcium to protect your bones makes sense. The problem's far more complicated than just taking calcium though. The recommended daily allowance for calcium is around 1,000 milligrams a day for most adults and over 50 around 1,200 milligrams. And the reality is that most people who eat a reasonably varied diet are getting close to or meeting this just through diet alone. Calcium-rich foods include dairy products like milk, yogurt, cheese. But even if you're not eating dairy, you can get calcium from leafy green vegetables, canned sardines and salmon, tofu, nuts like almonds, and even legumes and lentils. And there's a lot of fortified foods containing calcium. The calcium supplement industry grew largely off the back of research back in the 80s, and a series of studies showed that supplementing with calcium could reduce bone fracture risk. And so it became standard advice, especially for postmenopausal women, to take 500 to 1,000 milligrams of supplemental calcium daily. But more recent research has complicated that picture, and a key question has emerged. Does supplemental calcium behave the same way as dietary calcium? And the evidence suggests that it does not. A common misconception about calcium. Your blood calcium level on a standard blood test is almost always normal, even when your bones are being depleted. The body maintains the blood calcium at the expense of bones. So a normal serum calcium result doesn't mean you're getting enough calcium. If you're concerned about your bone health, the best way to check for osteoporosis is with a DEXA scan. That's a bone mineral density test. So there are some situations where calcium supplementation could be appropriate or even beneficial. Calcium supplements are most justified when dietary intake genuinely falls below that minimal threshold of 1,000 milligrams. And there's some people that may more likely to occur in. Also, if you've been diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia, that's a clear indication that you need more calcium, but not just calcium, you also need the cofactors too. So if you have a very low dairy intake and you're also not eating a range of non-dairy calcium-rich foods, you may need to take supplemental calcium. If you have malabsorption issue like celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, you've had gastric bypass surgery, you may need supplemental calcium. People taking corticosteroid medications, proton pump inhibitors for things like reflux, these are all things that can deplete calcium levels or affect the absorption of calcium. So calcium supplementations only if you're lacking calcium in your diet or you need more because of a medical condition. and it should always be paired with the cofactors, which we'll discuss in a moment, because calcium without the cofactors is where the big problem starts. Before we talk about calcium supplements, let's look at the two main health risks for taking calcium supplements. And there are two significant risks associated with high-dose supplemental calcium. And this has been highlighted in a lot of research over the past 2 decades. Number one is kidney stones. High supplemental calcium intake can increase the risk of kidney stones in susceptible individuals. And this is more of a concern when calcium supplements are taken without adequate fluid intake or combined with things like high oxalate foods. Also, if you're taking the wrong form of calcium. And dietary calcium from food can actually reduce your risk of kidney stones, so it's only the supplemental calcium that's a problem. Risk number two is vascular calcification and increased cardiovascular risk. This is a more significant concern. The reason calcium can cause increased cardiovascular risk is because when you take a large dose of calcium, especially in 500 milligrams or more, it can create a temporary spike in blood calcium levels, unlike the gradual absorption of calcium from a food. A supplement delivers a concentrated hit, and especially if you haven't got the cofactors, your body may not be able to absorb it very effectively, especially if you're lacking vitamin K2 and vitamin D. That excess calcium can be deposited in the soft tissues, including the arterial walls. And this vascular calcification leads to stiffer arteries, less flexible, and a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Think of calcium like a building material like concrete. You need it to build strong bones. But if it gets poured in the wrong place, like in your arteries instead of in your bones, this is when the damage can occur. And the cofactors, particularly vitamin K2, are like the traffic controllers that direct calcium where to go. And this is just with supplemental calcium, not dietary calcium. Food sources don't carry the same cardiovascular risk. Now let's talk about the cofactors, and this is super important. There are several nutrients that determine whether calcium you consume ends up in your bones, where it belongs, or somewhere where it shouldn't be. And the first one is vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for calcium absorption. Without vitamin D, you can consume all of the calcium you like, but you're going to absorb very little of it. And studies suggest that without sufficient vitamin D, you might only be absorbing 10 to 15% of the calcium. And with optimal levels, that can rise to 30 to 40%. This is why a calcium supplement without vitamin D is significantly less effective, and many supplements include both vitamin D and calcium. But you want to get your blood levels checked for vitamin D and make sure they're in the optimal range. Next is vitamin K2. And this is like the traffic controller I mentioned a moment ago. It activates two critical proteins, osteocalcin, which pulls calcium into the bone tissue, and something called matrix GLA protein, which actively removes calcium from the arterial walls and soft tissue. In practical terms, vitamin K2 determines where calcium is deposited, in your skeleton or in your arteries. The best dietary sources of K2 are fermented foods, particularly natto, which is a fermented soy product, as well as grass-fed dairy, egg yolks, and certain hard cheeses. And for most people eating a Western-style diet, they're not getting enough K2, which is why I recommend supplementing with K2 if you are taking calcium. Magnesium is also required for the conversion of vitamin D into its active form, so it plays a direct role in bone formation as well. About 60% of the body's magnesium is stored in bone. Without adequate magnesium, the entire calcium vitamin D system is compromised. So if you've determined that you do need a calcium supplement, the form you choose matters significantly. So let's walk through the main options that you have. Calcium carbonate. This is the most common form, and you'll find it in many supplements. It's also the cheapest form, which is why many supplement companies use it. It has a very high percentage of elemental calcium, which sounds good. The problem is that it requires really good stomach acid for it to be absorbed. If you have low stomach acid, which becomes more common as people age, or you're taking a medication like a proton pump inhibitor, like Nexium, to lower stomach acid, you're not going to be absorbing the calcium very well. For most people, calcium carbonate is not my first choice, and it's the one most likely going to cause harm. Next, we have calcium citrate, and this is a better option for most people, especially for older adults. Calcium citrate does not require stomach acid. It's very well absorbed. It can be taken with or without food. And even though it may contain less calcium than calcium carbonate, you're going to be absorbing a lot more of that calcium. So it's better value for money. Another good one is calcium hydroxyapatite. This is calcium derived from bone, and it contains calcium in the same form that's found in bone, and also has trace minerals as well as growth factors. And research shows that the hydroxyapatite is very well absorbed and can help with osteoporosis. So they're the two main forms I recommend, citrate or hydroxyapatite. Another one is calcium bisglycinate. This is a chelated form. It's also very well absorbed, but it's also much more expensive. And regardless of which form you use, the body can only absorb around 500 milligrams of calcium at a time. So taking 1,000 milligrams in a single dose does not give you twice the benefit. And it may increase blood levels of calcium and potentially some of the risks I mentioned earlier. Also, calcium supplements can significantly interfere with the absorption of several other prescribed medications, like thyroid medication, and should be taken at least around 4 hours away from your thyroid medication. Taking them together will reduce the absorption of the thyroid hormone. Calcium can also inhibit iron absorption. So if you're taking iron supplements, you want to take your calcium at a different time of the day. Some medications like bisphosphonates which you take for osteoporosis, can also interfere with calcium absorption. And you want to take those at a separate time as well. Proton pump inhibitors like Nexium and Losec will affect the body's ability to absorb calcium, especially if you're taking the calcium carbonate form, and those medications are associated with osteoporosis. One of the most common questions I hear from clients is, how do I know if I have enough calcium? As I mentioned earlier, the serum blood calcium test is almost never helpful for answering whether you're getting enough calcium in your diet or not, as the body regulates calcium so tightly that it stays in that normal range, even if your bones are getting depleted. A better marker to test is parathyroid hormone. When blood calcium levels start to drop even slightly, the parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone to pull calcium out of the bones, and this raises the blood calcium levels. So if your parathyroid levels are hormone, that's often a signal that your body is not getting enough calcium, or even potentially not enough vitamin D, which are both important. In clinical practice, I'll routinely check parathyroid hormone alongside vitamin D. And as I mentioned earlier, I would always do a DEXA scan. Often doctors do a DEXA scan when you break a bone, when you're like 60 or 70 years of age, but by then it's too late. I recommend all people do one before the age of 50, so you've got a starting point of when you're at your optimal, and you can track changes over time. And calcium supplements are only the part of the story when it comes to bone health. Equally as important is exercise, especially weight-bearing exercise. This can be even just walking, resistance training, strength training, anything that loads the skeleton. It's a powerful stimulant for bone formation. All the calcium and the cofactors in the world will work better when paired with exercise. So these are the key things to focus on. Number one, prioritize calcium from food first. If you're not getting enough calcium from your food, calcium supplementation may be necessary, but make sure you're getting one that's well absorbed, like calcium citrate or calcium hydroxyapatite. Make sure you also have enough of the cofactors like vitamin D and K2. Never exceed more than 500 milligrams at a time when you're taking a single dose of calcium. Also check for any drug interactions that may be affecting your ability to absorb calcium. And finally, do weight-bearing exercise. Calcium without the weight-bearing exercise is only half the picture. So if you want to find out more about bone density, watch this video next on osteoporosis and how the best way to build up your bone density. And if you have any comments, leave them below. I'm happy to answer them if you have any questions about calcium, or if you've got ideas on other videos you would like to see.